So fun to keep people so that they're also too off balance to even realize what the politics of what I'm saying are. Because in this world where everyone is so sure about their dumb sides and their orthodoxies, then they're not really. And so if they think that you're on their team, then they're, so I have to keep tricking them into thinking I'm on their team just to give them the other way. And then just as these people think I'm on their you know what I mean? That's my favorite kind of comedy.
Welcome to Femme Forte, the show that amplifies the voices of women and non-binary creatives in music and the performing arts. I'm your host, Amanda DeFries. She's fearless, funny, and totally one of a kind. This week, I'm joined by comedian and creator Arielle Isaac Norman. Arielle takes us behind the scenes of her life as a touring comic and how tech and strategy play just as big as a role in comedy as punchlines. We also dive into the importance of networking and the relationship between politics and comedy. This was one of the most thought-provoking, hilarious, and unfiltered conversations I've had, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Welcome back to Femme Forte. Today we have a very special guest. Today we have Arielle Isaac Norman. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks. Thanks for thinking of me as special.
Of course. One of the things that I'm really, really excited to just jump into is, especially entering a new realm of all different aspects of performing arts, is stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. For me personally, being in Austin for the last 2.5 years, stand-up comedy is actually something that I have learned to appreciate more and go to more stand-up shows. I mean, when I first discovered you, I went to I believe it was called Too Gay Enough.
Too Gay Enough? That's funny. It was just gay enough.
Oh, sorry. It was Gay Enough.
You added the two part.
Sorry. One of the first shows that I discovered you was from the Gay Enough show, and then I actually saw you open for Ashley Gavin at the Moontower Comedy Festival, and now the show that you have every Tuesday at the East Comedy Club.
East Austin Comedy.
Because
if you type in East Austin Comedy Club to Uber, it takes you to the old location.
Gotcha.
So we try to get everyone to go East Austin Comedy.
Perfect. Yeah, at East Austin Comedy to the show that you have now.
Lesbian Friends Comedy.
So one of the things I'm really, really excited to talk to you about is your journey. How did you get started into comedy, and what was the pinnacle point for you to really decide to pursue stand-up comedy full time?
Okay, I'm going to try to do the most TLDR version of this that I've ever done. I fell in love with stand-up comedy when I was 16, 17. I discovered it online on Yahoo's old radio thing, Launchcast Plus. They started giving me stand-up at one point, and I was like, more of this. And I rated everything 100 to give me more. But I had no clue of any kind of way to get into it. All I knew is that there were some people who were famous and did hour-long specials sometimes. And so when I was 23, I was living in Orlando, and then I met some people, and I moved to New York, and I did a few open mics, and then I ran away from it for 7 years or something. 4 years, whatever, because I started at 27 and a half. I was living in Boston. I was living above this guy who did comedy. We were friends. And then another friend of mine was ushering at the Boston Comedy Festival. And I was like, wait, what are you doing in the comedy world? In my head, it was still my thing. And he was like, oh, I took a class and I did an open mics, and now I'm in, and I'm like, okay, well, so I forced myself to take a class that my friend taught. I was so nervous. I pooped 5 times a day when I first started. I could tell you all kinds of stories about how nervous I was, but I took the class, and, after a week or two of the class, I started going to open mics as well. And you just, have to force yourself to do it. And if you live in almost every city of any size has some kind of comedy scene where there will be at least an open mic or two, if not many. And so I started doing that. And by the end of my class, we did our little class showcase, and they had me be the headliner of it. And I was definitely the best, and easily. And, and so I had run away from it for so long. So by the time I started really doing it at that point when I was 27, I knew immediately this is what I'm on earth to do. This was, I was like Jonah running away from the Ninevites or whatever and going into the whale. I had to do this. This is who I am, and it really gave me a lot of clarity because I spent so much of my 20s really trying all kinds of things and like, oh, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do that. And finally, I stopped a ton of nonsense I was doing and just was focusing on stand-up. And so I did all kinds of things. When I first started, I was married to like a millionaire. I left her and didn't take anything. And then I moved to Austin and was with a farmer. So we were just both poor, and we were, pursuing very non-profitable enterprises like comedy and farming. And so just, we both worked multiple jobs and did all, and just went to every open mic I could. Austin in 2015, when I moved here, had a really cool scene for developing comics. It doesn't anymore. Now it's really, really cutthroat and hard, and it's hard to get stage time. For people who are doing open mics and stuff, it's really brutal now. But at the time, it was one of the best scenes, if not the best scene in the country for developing comics. We had some really cool people here, and every night you could do at least 3 mics, if not 4. And so I continued doing it and working all the jobs. And then for the last 4 years, I have been doing it full time. But that's to say that like in 2020, I still worked throughout the pandemic. Then I quit my job at Juiceland here in Austin toward the end of 2020. And I did van life for the first 6 months of 2021. So basically no income, except for a tiny bit of little internet writing stuff or whatever. Maybe Dogecoin going up at one point. And so then when I got back here in 2021, I've never gotten a job since, but I'd put myself through all kinds of shit in order to not have to have a job. I lived with crazy people who I didn't realize were crazy. And one thing was supposed to be a house sitting gig, and then it turned into a cult. And then we lived with, me and my then girlfriend lived with another group, and what we joked was a polyamorous cult or commune or something. But then one of the people in there started dating someone who was in an actual cult, and the whole thing went to shit, and they're all divorced, and some of them are living in a trailer by the river now. I don't know. So, but I lived in all these weird situations in order to keep my bills very, very low. Van life had gotten my bills to be like nothing. Oh, wow. And so then from there, I have continued to be, because I needed this time. It was so hard because as a comic, it's like I have to produce my own shows and market them and book them and do all the work for them. I have to book myself on the road. I'm my own agent. I'm my own marketer. I'm my own publicist. I'm my own everything. And there's just a million jobs that I do. And then I have my own podcast and everything. Follow AI Norman on YouTube. And so I needed that time. And so that's what I did, is I made my bills really low. But then what I didn't realize was that I needed to have money in order to invest in myself, to buy the equipment for podcasts and everything. And I think my parents just really got that part of the equation in life wrong. And I was taught a lot of wrong lessons about money. And so now I have been figuring out how to get more money so that I can elevate and everything. But it's been a journey of 4.5 years now of being a full-time comic and making more and more money slowly and steadily. And now I just got an agent who I'm going to be starting with in the new year. So
that's really exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
With all those like skills that you had to learn, you talk about learning how to market and produce your own shows, as well as being your own agent. Where did you find, or what resources did you find to be able to come up with those skills and learn those skills kind of on the job?
I mean, I wish that I had been smart enough, aware enough, sociable enough or whatever to get a mentor, although it is hard to even fully find a mentor because things in the industry change so quickly. And a lot of the advice that someone would have given you 5 years ago is completely moot now. So I did start a podcast for a couple of years called Leading the Blind, and I would interview comics who were at least a few years ahead of me in my journey. And I learned a lot from them, but everything I've done is just picked up a little bit along the way because I do other people's shows, and then I see, oh, that's an interesting thing they do, or hey, how do you market? And you just try to ask people all the time and go, oh, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do things this way. And so I've just picked up bit by bit by bit. But I wish that, I had I wish I'd asked more questions throughout, and I'm sure I still should, but I wish I'd asked more questions of people earlier. I always wanted to like not look like an idiot, and there is this weird thing where you have to kind of project success and confidence, but you still need to ask for help and mentorship. And then sometimes when you would ask people, when I would ask people, like, how do you get an agent or how do you market this? They're really like, dude, I don't know. I lucked into it. They saw me at this one thing. And then that's so much of this is you have to, a lot of opportunities in these kinds of industries come because you're doing it long enough. If you're really talented and hardworking and kind, opportunities will come. Even if you've only got one of those or hot or something, even if you're only hot and confident, some of those, but, and so you have to keep doing it long enough until those things come, but you're always going to learn a ton along the way just from trying things and making mistakes and seeing how other people do them. And it's just everything. That's something I really like actually about this industry is that you do have to just learn everything on the job. I don't like formalities and stuff. Like I don't like applying for a job and and having to write the resume. I just don't like that stuff. I would rather just be able to do it myself and then learn how to do it, because I just can't stand like promoting yourself. And I guess I still have to do that when I write a bio or anything, but I don't like the formalities and stuff of like the regular business world. So it's cool to kind of just for all of us misfits to be doing this thing and just learning from each other's mistakes and successes.
Yeah, I mean, you see it so much now in today's world that like people are really being entrepreneurs in their own way, but it's not the typical, I'm going to go to business school and learn all these, things about the core of business development that make it work. Really, especially now in the evolving age of like social media and just the digital world just growing every day, is new people are finding different business opportunities and are making it work in so many different ways that aren't like on the book,
right?
Which I think is really cool. With that being said, you talk about being able to transition in all these different situations from like going to van life and then now being able to, over the last 4 years, like really pursue it full time. What was the motivation to keep going? I think that one of the biggest things that I often see in people, even in the musician world, for example, is, as we know, the arts, it's getting better, but it is not super easy to, automatically become successful in any arts industry. And a lot of times, as we know, like it's really about like keep going and not giving up. So what was the pinnacle source for you to like keep going despite all the different like obstacles that you faced?
Okay, well, there's a 2-part answer to that. And one is that, it's interesting because when you say like going full time, I didn't really go full time so much as quit my day job and not get another one. I was already full time. You know what I mean? Comedy was already a full time job. I remember calculating the hours at some point because my one of my exes, she was technically working 3 jobs or something, but then we counted up all my hours with my one part-time job plus everything I did with comedy, and I was still working 20 hours a week more than she was,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that being said, part of that also leads into the rest of my answer, which is that this is so fun. It's so fun. Again, it's what I'm on earth to do. It's one of my favorite ways to express myself. And I love the immediate feedback. So, if you're a writer, a musician, even like the feedback is less direct. It takes longer to get to it. Maybe if you're at a reading or something, but most of writing, you got to sit there and do and hope that it's good for someone. You go to a writing workshop, half the people are always going to hate it, no matter what it is. And if you're a musician, yeah, it could be that people are super into it, but they also might be politely there, not really paying attention a lot of time until you really get to that. But, so you kind of assume people are enjoying it, whatever. But with comedy, it is just, you're getting laughs or you're not. You can see everyone's face, and so there's a lot of reinforcement. And you immediately with comedy become addicted because every like good set that you have that is better than your last best set or good in a really cool way, whatever, each really good set is like doing pure cocaine. Not quite,
Yeah.
but kind of.
Yeah.
And not that I've ever done pure cocaine, but I can imagine from the shitty cocaine I've done a few times. But, and from what I've read. So yeah, and then that's the thing. Then you need it to be better. You need an even bigger audience to give you even more, and you need to, to get that. And so you're always like going for higher highs, but you get used to it. And then the kind of like even amazing sets don't make you feel that amazing, but the bad sets don't make you feel that bad. But your bad also keeps raising. All of that kind of stuff is always happening. But there's so many steps along the way, especially when you're starting comedy. At first, you're just trying to get on open mics and trying to do well at open mics. Eventually someone books you for your first show, and maybe they have you do a 5 or 7 minute set on that. And then you do a show that actually pays $4. And then you get to do that show that you thought was so cool. And then you get to headline your first show. And then you just keep kind of building things, and and at least for the first several years, just so much will propel you on like that, because there's always like these concrete things you can accomplish. You get accepted into this festival, this, that, or the other. So, and I knew from doing that Leading the Blind podcast that it would become more difficult, because I remember my friend Amy Miller, a really funny comic, really talented and great, but she talked about, she was like 8 years in and she'd accomplished all the things that were on that checklist. And now she's like, I don't know, I got to like build my own career somehow. And I see she's doing well. I see she's touring. I mean, I think she has figured things out. But then it did become for me like, oh, I have to kind of figure out where to go from here. There's a lot of different paths forward. And then that became hard again, because instead of just getting good at comedy and that being my job, then my job became, okay, so do I focus on this podcast? Do I focus on touring? Do I focus on, promoting myself? And one of the pieces of advice that's really changed is that you were told, like, don't put that much of your material online. Just don't do it, because people are going to steal your jokes, or people will already see it, or you won't be able to put it into a special, or this, that, or the other. And during the pandemic, some of the Gen Z people started putting their stuff online, and they have taken off. And just because they got there first, even though a lot of them are not the best comics, but they did that. And then they made us all do it. We were all kind of trying to have a healthy relationship to social media and our phones and technology, by the way, Gen Z and Alpha. And then you guys ruin it because you're like, no, let's all be 24/7 online and just competing in this rat race. But it kind of showed this opportunity of like, oh, okay, now instead of the gatekeepers, we all just have to become famous online. And so it's an interesting thing, because now a lot of the traditional gatekeeping is gone, but also it wasn't just gatekeeping, it was like opportunities where people would discover good talent. That's all gone pretty much. No agents are looking for talented people. They're looking for people who have a following already. Right. So you have to develop your own following. So then it becomes like, okay, now I got to figure out, do I want to spend my time learning techniques and whatever, or just doing a better job? But then those other people have better cameras, and then, so it's kind of an endless but fun game and challenge of the career. And again, when it's kind of crazy to me. There are some people who do comedy where you're like, you're not talented. This is clearly not what you're on earth to do. What are you doing? But then I realized, like, for a lot of people, it's one, a community for them. It's 2, creative expression gives them their life. They have some job they do, and maybe they have a family and whatever. They're just living a very different life than I am, and good for them. And you can be a part of the community. Please be a positive, supportive part of the community. Maybe start a show and host that, whatever. But for me, it's like, there's no choice. Like, I have to do this. It's like that. It would be crazy for me not to. I have so many things, and I love it, and it's so fun. That's the other thing. It's like so fun, and you feel really cool. I mean, everybody thinks you're so cool for doing stand up. It's kind of weird sometimes, because people will be like, oh my God, you have a show tonight? How do you feel? You're like, I do shows all the time. Yeah, like I feel nothing.
This is my job. I do this for a living.
I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. But it's awesome. But you're like, oh, no, yeah.
I totally understand, like, what you mean by, especially with the new generation being online all the time. I mean, the 100% of, the aspects that you talk about with the podcast, with the podcasting community, it's, podcasting started a long time ago. And now, with YouTube and everything, and social media and Instagram and TikTok, it's all about those like clips and reels and shorts. And that's something that I have to be a part of the game. I can't just like record my podcast on my iPhone. Like, I try to like make a big deal out of it, create the set, create the production, like make sure like lots of, high qualityness like goes into it. And even with, like you said, with comedians, like I see, the DSLR in the background, like making sure to like record the shows so you can get those like snippets to bring you that online presence. And I think that's what it's so interesting just in the creator world in general of how much you have to like live for the online world and how that impacts your success versus what you just said.
And not only that, but your creativity. This is something I was just hearing some people talk about this yesterday, actually, but that how much of our time and energy we now have to spend on all of this kind of stuff and trying to go viral, trying to do all of this right way. And by the way, very class-based issues where people can't afford.
Right.
Lots of people can't afford the good equipment, although there's lots of ways to figure it out. The libraries have some really cool programs that I've just found out about, at least here in Austin. But yeah, so like it takes away, like I wish we could find a different way because it takes away so much of the time and energy that I used to spend on comedy and writing. I just don't have that kind of time because I have to compete for this technology stuff. We have to make all these videos look so good for the lowest attention spans. And then we have to make clips of all of that, hoping that one will go viral enough because even when they do pretty well, no one actually goes and watches the real thing most of the time. They just go, cool clip, and then move on because they're not going to watch something longer than 90 seconds. And so the whole thing is wasting a ton of time and energy. And it would be nice. Again, it's like this gatekeeping thing. Yes, the gatekeeping being gone is kind of cool. A lot of those guys were sexist, if not everything elseist, that were gatekeeping in the industries and stuff. But then it's been replaced with this system that, again, is so based on privilege because it's an enormous amount of privilege to get that good camera. And every time I get a new camera, and I think, okay, they've got a quality. Then all the cool kids have got the even more expensive cameras, and now mine looks like a 2012 phone again, compared to whatever $20,000 camera that this guy is chucking around to his comedy shows. And people's brains, they use a heuristic of like, oh, if it's really good quality video, that means someone has invested a lot in this person. So that must mean it's a high quality performance. People are so fooled by that kind of stuff. And also people sometimes are adding laughs to their videos, by the way. Yeah. I've even done it before once because sometimes a clip where usually the audience laughs better, but this audience didn't quite laugh that well at that, but then they laugh so good at the next thing and there's a weird crowd work moment. Yeah. And you go, okay. But then you realize like how much of everything we're watching is fake, but it's enhanced to get us to think, wow, that's so good. The emperor's wearing a great outfit. And it's really so much is about production value. And I wish people would like be able to watch things with more discernment and go, wow, that was a really smart joke. I like that. It's, maybe the audience didn't laugh as much and the video is grainy, but wow, that's a good joke. And watch another one and go, huh. Guy's really, really popular, and that's a beautiful video, but it didn't have a lot of substance. But most people don't do that. Most people, it's kind of like there's little monkey brains just going, okay. Anyway, right. I mean, maybe that's too cynical, but I do think
a lot of we get in the age, even now, I found myself to be into, the term doom scrolling, where you're just dissociating, kind of just going through it.
Yeah, did you see the word of the year is brain rot, according to some whatever. Yeah, doom scrolling leads to brain rot, I think, is the idea.
Yeah,
yeah, and even if you're not, like I said, it's just this weird thing where it's maybe good that gatekeeping has been diminished, but it's been replaced by a system that is still so based on privilege that I'm not sure it's better, because it's kind of like, I remember this one guy who was a big deal in the comedy world, the international comedy world. He was a huge gatekeeper because he determined who got on this one thing at this one festival that's, all, by the way, now bankrupt because of all kinds of fucked up issues. But I remember when he got canceled for Me Too stuff, and it wasn't even Me Too. So people added on the Me Too stuff. He said the N-word in this situation. It was crazy. Anyway, but he got canceled, and I just remember thinking, yeah, this guy was a weird sexist pig. Like, he definitely like talked to me, touched me in certain way, whatever. Like, but he probably also would have given me the opportunity. Like, he'd known me and saw me develop, and I was probably this close to getting that opportunity. It's not the first time that something like that has happened. And you go, okay, he maybe should be replaced, but who are you going to replace him with? Because is it going to be better or worse? And in fact, nothing has replaced him. Now that whole thing is gone, and what has replaced it is can you afford, $10,000+ cameras, and can you, and also it's still harder in Austin than in LA or New York because we don't have as much of this industry, like making the cool big quality podcast or having the production and the promotion aspects to it. So we're still kind of a fledgling industry situation, but the podcast world is growing in the Austin comedy, and we do have the best comedy.
Yeah.
Except for maybe New York.
You mentioned podcasts, and you mentioned the podcast that you previously hosted as well as politically non-binary, and then I think it's now like Are We Wrong?
Yes.
And so I wanted to touch a little bit on that because a lot of your podcast, as well as your comedy yourself, touch on the gender issues and political topics, and I think that's something that's like really important to bring into comedy. And so I just wanted to ask you, why is it important to you, and how did you kind of see that as being kind of one of your main topics that you touch on specifically in your comedy?
Yeah, I think the first few years that I did comedy, it was like a lot of sex stuff, some lesbian stuff that was like easier to talk about and get people to laugh about, and just easy to write. And then the gender stuff started becoming so interesting to me. When I moved here, I started making more and more trans friends and trans comedian friends, and I became best friends with one, and we started doing this podcast called Gender Fluids together, and it was this sex and kink podcast and stuff, sex, gender, kink, fetish. We always had a fetish of the week and everything. It's a really great and fucked up podcast. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that, as long as you're not a pearl clutcher, then, but I mean, well, you have to be pretty hard to offend if you want to watch this, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I started getting really interested in it. I mean, I also started dating this trans dude in 2018. And so I was exploring my own gender throughout the podcast, or dating him and afterwards. And it just started becoming so culturally interesting because people had all kinds of ideas about what gender was now, and the reactions to it are so strong. And there's so much that happens in that space that's absolutely ridiculous and just ripe for humor, and something, and there's so many contradictions and hypocrisies on both sides, if you will, both, but here we are. And yeah, so the more I wrote about gender, the more I was also writing politically. And what I really like in comedy are to take really controversial ideas and play with them in a way where I'm kind of making everyone happy, but also making everyone question their shit a little bit. And it's so fun to look like this and have everyone expect one thing when I walk on stage, and then play with that just to give them a, you know what I mean? What do you call these?
Right hook.
Right. Just to give them a right hook. And then and just as soon as they think that that's where it is, then I uppercut over here, and that's how I think of it, is like, it's so fun to keep people so that they're also too off balance to even realize what the politics of what I'm saying are. Because in this world where everyone is so sure about their dumb sides and their orthodoxies, then they're not really. And so if they think that you're on their team, then they so I have to keep tricking them into thinking I'm on their team just to give them the other way. And then just as these people think I'm on their you know what I mean? That's my favorite kind of comedy. And it's, and especially in this ridiculously polarized world, it is really fun to play with people in those ways. And I think these issues are really important. I mean, politically, our country, it's been worsening throughout my lifetime. And, I don't blame it on one team or the other, one person or another. It's been happening for a long time. I think maybe Newt Gingrich was the one who stopped. It used to be that all the Republicans and Democrats all lived in Washington so that they would all go to each other's families on the weekends and go to each other's parties, and they all liked each other. They all got along. If your wives know each other, it's a very different relationship. And I could be getting Newt Gingrich wrong, but it's one of these people who convinced everybody to live in their own hometowns and then just go to Washington Monday to Thursday or Friday, whatever, and then go home. Mm-hmm. And then that meant that So there's so many things that have happened throughout the last few decades that have just meant that our country is in this ridiculously polarized place. And so I think we absolutely need to heal that. It's this whole lesser of two evils every time is not going to work for me. This race to the bottom, we can put up the most garbage candidate in the world, but you still got to vote for them because their person is even worse. And I'm like, that's not a functional way. And I think everybody knows that our country and culture have been really suffering for all this. And so I'm always trying to heal, and I'm always trying to show people through my comedy and my podcast and talking to people after shows. Almost everybody is pretty reasonable. Those fringes that we see sometimes are mostly online. Even those people who are crazy online, sometimes you talk to them in person and they're being reasonable, but they're getting,
Right.
And so I want people to know that if we have some sane candidates who are kind of just be sane and reasonable and have some good intentions, we're all going to want those people. We all want, and if we could just find some that aren't corrupt, just sane and not corrupt is
Right.
all.
Yeah.
Could we do that? And then with gender, gender is so fundamental to everything in our lives. The concept of a binary, much less what male and female are, and then what we should be doing when it comes to children's well-being, when it comes to the fairness in society, when it comes to women's safety, when it comes to trans people's safety, when it comes to just how to think of progress or how to think of civil rights and equality, but also protection for vulnerable classes. Like, these things are so important. And I don't see what could be more fundamental to like human existence than like the male and female embodied realities and how we conceptualize those. And I watched one kind of special interest group who kind of working in this weird way throughout academia and Tumblr kind of go, here's our new rules for what everything means and how it's going to be. And then the rest of the like sweet Democrat, liberal, blue team world kind of go, oh, is this the new civil rights issue? We did race and then we did gay and now it's trans. Great. Here's your blank check. Just whatever you guys want is what we're sure is the right answer. And then we've got all these weird like medical special interest groups who are people who are like not really professionals necessarily, but are actually just, trans and wanting to make money or just trans and wanting things to be a certain way. And so and then because of the weird, way that the left had gotten, the illiberal left had become a place where you couldn't ask questions, you couldn't speak your own opinions, you couldn't whatever. If you were anything, if you diverted from the orthodoxy at all, they would call you a transphobe or a racist or something. Because of that, I was like, okay, well then the liberal ideas are going to get worse and worse and worse, while conservative people, except for a little weird fraction of their stuff on the right, but like that didn't have as much control on the right, they were able to have more conversations with each other. And more of the smarter people from the left were starting to go talk to people on the right because you could talk there. And I'm like, okay, guys, this is... And I watched in 2016 when Trump got elected the first time, all the liberals wailing and moaning and me going, hey, I have some ideas about why Hillary lost. I have some ideas about why Trump is more popular than the establishment.
Yeah.
You guys, and they're like, no, it's because of sexism. It's because of racism, whatever. And we're just going to call them stupid and bad louder. And then eventually they'll figure out that they are deplorable.
Yeah.
And that they should stop being deplorable. Or else, if not that, we get to keep moaning that we're oppressed victims forever. And that'll be fun too. And also, we're raising a ton of money. All of the organizations. You know how many people made a lot more money after Trump won?
I saw the stock markets.
Well, not just that. I'm
Yeah.
talking about all the people who are raising money going, can you believe the orange man? We have to stop him. So please give us more money, more money, more money. I mean, the whole thing is so crazy. So, I watched the political landscape just go so insane. And I watched my friends increasingly get crazier. The people still on the left weren't that crazy. They were talking about punching Nazis, which is a slippery slope up the ass kind of idea of like, well, who's going to determine who's a Nazi? If your guys are just calling anyone on the right Nazis, then please don't punch people,
Yeah.
So all of the kind of liberal bullshit I was watching, and look, I mean, if I lived in a more conservative world, I would be spending more time being more, critical of them. But I live in a more liberal world, and so I'm seeing all our bullshit, and I'm going, all right, I got to talk about this, and I got to try to help people see the error of our ways, because there's a lot of errors. And so, that's why the YouTube project I'm doing now, Are We Wrong, is on hold, formerly known as Politically Non-Binary, formerly known as MAGA, Make America Get Along Again, formerly known as Common Grounded. Anyway, but those are on pause. But right now my YouTube is AI Norman, and it's me doing a series called Make Democrats Great Again, because it's just like I'm the Republicans, the new Republicans are a mixture of the old Republicans and the new Republicans. Mm-hmm. And I like some of the new Republicans. I don't like a lot of the old Republicans, and I don't like things being too conservative. And so, but right now they have the more authentic and earnest actors. And so they're going to win, and they're probably going to win for the next 12 years or so. Mm-hmm. And then maybe they should, you know what I mean? But unless and until our side figures out how to cut out a lot of our corruption, and it's probably going to take a figure like Donald Trump, but from the left, to, but maybe because they're on the left, they'll be more empathetic,
right,
and kinder, but we need someone to be smart and funny and much more authentic and able to do Rogan. Anyway, okay, sorry, I'm ranting a lot, but this is, you can see I am passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, and all more to why, I wanted to highlight you, and because you really are passionate about what you do, both in comedy and in the political science world. And so with that being said, there was one more topic I want to hit home about. And one of the things I actually really appreciate about you, at least from what I see from a digital landscape, is how much you share about the grit and effort and work it takes to be an entertainer. I mean, even when we kind of were talking about scheduling this, I know you had a lot of shows booked, different nights and all that, but really being able to travel to and from, across the country and then come back to your home in Austin. Can you just share a little bit about what your day-to-day is, and what the actual grit and effort it is to be someone like you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the grit has been different throughout the time, because again, when I'm a year in, it looks like me waking up at 5 a.m., walking 4.5 miles to work at Picnic Coffee Shop here. Don't go there. The woman who owns it's horrible. Is really good though, but she's a horrible person. Anyway, but the original Picnic, and then working 8 hours, walking 4.5 miles home, and then having my girlfriend drop me off at open mics so that I could be at open mics, signing up at 6:30, and then going up at 7, and then it's sometime between 7 and 8:15, and then going up, and then going to the next one, and and then DMing and saying, hey, can I go up early, all that kind of stuff, and then coming home and having very little time with my partner to do anything else. My entire social life is just, I'm going to multiple nights. I would try to sometimes be a little bit balanced about it and do only 4 or 5 nights a week, but really 5 to 7 nights a week was the most normal, and doing that, and then plus once a week recording a podcast, whatever. So there's that kind of stuff. There's also a lot of these trips that I've taken. I have used couch surfing, and I have stayed with a couple of 21-year-old lesbians who had all these cats. When the pee was, it was, oh God, and there was a river of it, and the toilet was broken, and so you had to sit very gingerly with your feet on either side of the litter box, try to make sure that, or the other day I stayed in I needed to get from Mobile to Plano, and so I needed to spend one night along the way, and I stopped in Shreveport, and I thought this place looked cute, but I'm pretty sure I got fleas from this weird Airbnb out in the wood. So I got flea bites. So I need to text her and let her know. I'm not going to send a bad review, but I need to text the chick and be like, I think I got flu. But now it's been a week and a half. Anyway, so I've, again, even to this day, I save money where I can, unless my girlfriend's traveling with me. But when I'm traveling alone, I'm in cheap motels or weird Airbnbs, but sometimes it's great. And this Airbnb's got this whole Christmas theme, and it's just a sweet home they have a bunch of kids, and they've made their rooms into. And I love meeting new people on the road, and so and that's I've stayed at all kinds of weird comics places, whether it's a couch or a guest bedroom, but they've never washed those sheets, and there's no towel when you shower. But he's offered you all the weed and video games that you could want, and so I've slept in my car before. I've done acid thinking it would help me sleep in my car, and then maybe I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know. And then so it's been fun. I am trying to graduate. I'm 38 now, and I'm trying to graduate to a place where I stop with all of the craziness, and I get to stay in some like decent places and don't sleep in my car anymore and whatnot. But I've made a ton of sacrifices, and I think that's the thing I want people, because again, like when you say how do you get through it, it's like you gotta love it. You gotta know you're supposed to be doing that with your life. I don't know how. I mean, I know a lot of people in our city, in our world, in our whatever, don't believe in God in any way, but I think it's useful to believe in some kind of universal idea of something, because I feel that the universe wants me to be expressing it through comedy.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that about yourself, then it's kind of crazy. It's like one thing to do it here and there in your little town and it's fun, but it would be crazy to sleep in your car in order to go to, somewhere you've never heard of in Georgia before to perform for 45 people, 30 of whom are comics who've come out to see the headliner who's traveling, and you get to meet those, but it's a huge blessing. I mean, I do look around my life often and go, I'm so lucky. Like I'm living people's dream. They just don't know the sacrifice it entails. Yeah. They don't know how little money I'm making living that dream. Because if you see me on stage, you know what I mean? Like it feels like a whole thing, but a lot of times you're seeing comics on stage and there's 150 people in the room and they're having a great time. The comics still might be getting paid $25, $50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just so everyone knows.
Yeah.
Tip your comics when possible.
Well, with that being said, with any lasting thoughts, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give yourself for you starting out comedy for the first time? The biggest pieces of advice I'm going to smush together are that you have to think of this as like everything you're doing is always an investment. And that goes for like when you're starting out, maybe go ahead and if you haven't gone to college yet or you're still whatever, get trained, get whether it's degree or just classes or whatever in audio-visual stuff. Learn all the technical skills possible that you can have to elevate yourself, because it's going to be pretty expensive to do this. You want to have a network of people, and it's all about the network. And that's the thing I didn't understand. I had heard all these men give this comedy advice that was like, you just got to be undeniable, man. You just got to be undeniable. You got to be so good, and then people see you and things are going to happen. And that is true. You should be undeniable, but no one's undeniable 100% of the time, for one. And two, like a lot of advice that you get from successful people, they're telling it from a just so story of what their life was. And they think of themselves as undeniable, and that's why they got it. People say that story of like, oh, when things are going well, it's because it's them, right? Yeah. And that's the way rich people think they deserve it, kind of a thing. And a lot of it had to do with luck or privilege. And so, I've heard some comics who are very famous but aren't necessarily the best comics say things like that too. And so I realized, yeah, you need to be a really good comic for sure. But along the way, and especially in the beginning, you need to be making friends. You need to make friends. Try your best to find people you really want to make friends with who are talented in some way, but don't base it all off necessarily your favorite, whatever. Find the people that you click with, that you think maybe are going places, whatever, but make friends, because that's where your biggest opportunities are going to come from. That's where your biggest support's going to come from. And so like, yeah, if you're still going to college, I didn't know college was all about networking.
You know, you can read books on your own time, whatever. I didn't realize that it's a networking opportunity and that you need to be making high quality connections. And that's the thing, make high quality connections as early and as often as possible. And yeah, you still have to do all the other stuff. You still have to work really hard. You still have to be really talented. You still have to get lucky, and you get lucky by doing it long enough. A lot of it is a war of attrition. Most people do quit because it costs so much to do this. So a lot of people will quit. But if you're talented, if you're hardworking, you're kind, and you keep going, you'll keep getting more opportunities. But you'll get so many more and better opportunities earlier. If I always wanted everyone to like me, I didn't realize I needed to be their friends. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it was harder in the before times in Austin comedy. It was a smaller pool. So for someone who is maybe a little neurodivergent, gay, just weird. You know, I was raised more, I'm just kind of a weird person. I'm probably more introverted than most comics are. I don't like big groups. I like one-on-one a lot. And that's even in the comedy world, even when I am having a nice one-on-one, some asshole will join the conversation, which might be fine, until then one more person joins it. Yeah. Once we're at 4, I'm out unless we are close friends, especially if there's noise. Now I can't hear anyone. As soon as it's 4 people, if there's noise around, I can't hear anyone. And so it's a better time for me in terms of socialization, but because with comedy, you're going to be working another job when you start, and you're going to be trying to go to as many mics as possible, or else you're not going to be good enough at this. Then you also have to spend a lot of time socializing with people, you know? And so maybe I would also say probably don't be in a relationship or date for your first. I wish I had not been in no offense to all of the lovely people that I've been with, but I do wish I had been single for the first at least 5 or 6 years of comedy.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. I'm so excited for our listeners to hear all the wonderful advice that you give. Where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at AI Norman on YouTube. AI Norman. And you can go to, if you're like a low attention span person, you can just go to Instagram and follow me at Ellen DeGenderless. That's good too. I do like the numbers going up on there. So Ellen DeGenderless, AI Norman, Lesbian Friends Comedy.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Bamford. Be sure to check out her show, Lesbian Friends, every first Tuesday of the month at Roscoe's in Austin. I hope this conversation left you feeling inspired, empowered, and just a little more connected to your own creative journey. Be sure to follow today's guests and support the incredible work they're doing. You can find all their links in the episode description. And if you enjoy this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend, leave a rating or review, and follow Femme Forte wherever you get your podcasts.